All right, folks, welcome to Nino's Corner.tv. I've got a very, very special guest today, Zagami. Zagami, ex-Illuminati member, Jesuit priest, knows everything there is to know, or a Jesuit priest in training, I should say. Am I right in saying that?
I would say I studied with the Jesuits. I will not call myself. They wanted me to be a priest, but I was one of those people who I liked women too much to become a priest. That was the problem. Otherwise, they promised me, actually, I remember once a Monsignor said to me, Leo, you will make an excellent bishop, but the problem is that you like women. And I replied, it's better to like women than to like little boys.
Oh my gosh, yes. Actually, yes. And you're also the author of a 12-book series that you just completed, which is on Amazon. Which is every book is about 500 pages long, where you're actually spilling the beans on the Illuminati, right?
Yes.
It's a pyramid type thing, and you're starting at the very bottom or the base of it and then working your way up. You just finished your last book.
Yeah, after many years. I mean, this is a project that started almost 20 years ago. Eventually brought me to an exposure work on the internet between 2006 and 2009, though I realized that the internet was already not only trolled, but the censorship was very active, especially for people like me in those days. I ended up with an accusation of espionage in Norway. I was arrested for espionage. I had to flee Norway, go back to Italy, where I hadn't lived for 15 years, because I'm also half English, by the way, half British. And so what happened is that in the end, I started to publish these books in 2009 in Japan. But then when I was about to publish them in 2012 in Italy, the Vatican approached me, as I describe in volume 3 of my Confessions, and they offered me money and success and an unlimited bank account if I didn't publish these books in the Italian language. They said, well, Japanese, nobody reads Japanese, so you can continue in Japan. I, of course, went along with it, but published the book, the first book in Italian that came out in February 2012, and it was immediately a bestseller. And at that point, of course, the Vatican realized they didn't have a grip on me. But I described in detail how the Vatican intelligence, which is also subject I touch in volume 12 of my Confessions, which, like you said, is the last installment of the series. Because first of all, honestly, Nino, I wanted to have also familiarity with writing. I wanted to be challenging enough to challenge the Jesuits, because they are the scientists of the church, aside from being the soldiers and intelligence operatives of the church. So if you want to front your enemy, as you know very well as a boxer, you need to be ready and you need to train very much, no? And 100%. For that reason, in my youth, I was a martial artist myself, so I know very much about training, and you can't really challenge your enemy if you are not capable of doing it. So I thought the Jesuits would be the culmination of my work. And in this pyramid, they represent with the Black Pope, which is commonly is the name they commonly use for the superior general of the Jesuits. And he is the all-seeing eye of that pyramid that you always see.
Wow. Who is the Jesuit general?
Okay, the Jesuit general. First of all, a brief history of what the Jesuits are for those who are even not Catholic.
Okay, because I always said the Jesuits were the military arm of the Vatican Church.
Okay, let's say this. Formally, we can say that actually they are, but they are more in disguise than the Knights Templars. They came around in 1540. They were approved by the Vatican. In 1534 in Paris, Montmartre, they came together, this Inasio Loyola and these other disciples. They were, of course, most of them previously knights, soldiers, people who had fought battles, but they wanted to embrace the religious life. However, on the contrary of the Knights Templar, you see, the Vatican had abolished the Templar order, like I explained in my newest book. So they had a vacuum there. They had, of course, other orders, but they had nothing that was military enough or disciplined enough. So the Knights Templars, we know, they were warrior monks. They fought with the swords, they killed their enemies and all that. The Jesuits wanted to be a military order, but wanted to be a little bit more insidious. They wanted to not be perceived as such. So the head of the order is a general in every sense of the term. Is called and is referred as a general. But the order in itself is not formally known as a military order like the Knights Templars, because they don't go around with swords or weapons or things. Instead, what happened is that 20 years or so after their foundation, the Vatican accepted the creation of the first Vatican intelligence, which was known as the Holy Alliance, that later on will become the entity. And this is also another subject of my latest book of great importance, because the Jesuits were instrumental in the Counter-Reformation. So, of course, the first enemy, the first perceived enemy was England with Elizabeth I. But Elizabeth I was not stupid.
Wow.
She also created her own intelligence, which became the basis for now what we know as the 007. I mean, John Dee, who worked for Queen Elizabeth, signed himself 007. That's where they took the actual code from. So they were building this intelligence to counteract the intelligence of the Jesuits, who wanted to actually kill the Queen. So they were also assassins. You see, the difference with other other religious orders of the Vatican was that they had established, I mean, when Inasio Loyola went to the Pope in 1540 to have this order accepted, he said that we have 4 vows, and our 4th vow, which not every Jesuit takes, is of absolute obedience to the Pope more than Jesus Christ or anything else.
Wow.
So if I ask you to kill somebody and it goes against your religion, it doesn't matter, because you have taken the 4th vow. You have to obey what the Pope says. And of course, the Black Pope, which is the head of the Jesuits.
Which is behind the Pope that's public.
Yes. Yes.
Isn't there a white Pope and a black Pope?
Yes. That is commonly, you see, in the Vatican, they call it 𝗷𝗵𝗃𝗁 in Rome. The security people all around the Pope, they call him 𝗷𝗵𝗃𝗁 because he goes dressed, as we saw with Pope Francis, always in white. No? When instead, the Black Pope, who is in Borgo Santo Spirito, is somebody who goes around usually either not dressed as a priest, because Jesuits tend to disguise themselves, or either with a simply black, traditional priestly look that doesn't really, he said, oh, this is just a priest.
Right.
So it doesn't, they
blend in.
They are very much into blending. They're very much into disguising themselves, because remember that these people were very influential later on with the foundation of Freemasonry, the Illuminati, the think tanks that go with it.
So hold on 1 second. Let me just backtrack just a little bit here. So the Jesuit priests, which from Italy, this is all the Vatican, they would be called the Illuminati. They are what we call today.
No, the Illuminati are part of the Luciferian court of the Jesuits. They are known as the 𝗬𝗍𝗍. 𝗬𝗍 means superior inconnu. In French means unknown superior. But in reality, 𝗬𝗍 is Société Jesus, Society of Jesus, which is the name of the Jesuits. So let's not forget, the Jesuits were born along with the founder was Spanish, Inasio Loyola, Saint Ignatius, and then the first, let's say, bastions of power, of course, were Spain and Portugal, because the Spanish and the Portuguese Empire were the ones who were controlling at the time the whole scene. But also they had a special mission. You see, when Inasio Loyola founded this order, he had actually been arrested by the Inquisition several times. And this is quite shocking. Now, a guy gets, manages to have the Pope accept his order. Why? Because the Pope understood that the insidious nature of this order could actually be helpful to infiltrate the Reformation. Martin Luther, of course, came along and upset the church. There was then later Calvin. And then there was, of course, the Inquisition trying to fight witchcraft. And these guys were actually in the occult. Inasio Loyola was arrested by the Inquisition because he was an expert in he had been embraced by a group called the Alumbrados in Spain, which are the Illuminati. So he was actually acquainted with the Illuminati, and he started to manifest this interest also in religion. And it's in Montserrat. I don't know if you've ever been there, beautiful place outside of Barcelona in Spain. I would suggest you go to this incredible Benedictine monastery under this hill. that he went there and devoted himself to the Holy Mary, the Black Mary. But the devotion of the Holy Mary hides something different. Like for the Knights Templars who were devoted for the Holy Mary, in reality, they are devoted to Isis, the mother goddess. And so Ignazio Loyola, after founding his order, understood that the Knights Templar, whose main mission, as you know, was banking, the genie already came out of the bottle, so they couldn't really bring banking to the world because banking already existed at that point. The Knights Templars were the ones who had invented the first check or this and that. So they said, okay, what is our mission that we can really become really powerful in the world? Education. Because with education, we can control everything. We can control the elites, the making of the elites. We can go in foreign countries and trade knowledge. And that's what Ignazio Loyola did with his first disciples. He didn't only send them to the countries in the North Europe, like in Germany or whatever, to create, of course, bastions of faith to protect from Protestantism. He sent his first disciples to China to become advisors to the Emperor of China, to India, to Japan. And that was really a big change. And in fact, today, we are approaching the conclave in a couple of days. The conclave is, they want to sell it to the world as some kind of spiritual thing with the Holy Spirit coming down from the Sistine Chapel and blessings these cardinals. These cardinals are a bunch of criminals who eat food all. When they go to Rome, the only thing that they want is to eat carciofi alla romana, bucatini alla matriciana, all this food. They are into food. They're not into the Holy Spirit.
All right,
but
before we get into this, because I'm going to just slow you down for a second. We're going to go back. I want to know, Leo, how did you get called into joining the Jesuits? How did you start from the very beginning?
First of all, I was never a Jesuit. I was studying, like I showed you before, with the Jesuits. Now, even Donald Trump, here, this is me.
Okay. Yeah, I see you. Young
kid. And this is the head, 𝗬𝗶𝗹 and the school was the 𝗬𝗵𝗶𝗀, which was the Pope who actually, during the suppression of the Jesuits, when they were kicked out of the Vatican, was trying to protect them and reinstall them. So already the name of the school gives you an idea. Then, of course, in the book, I explain why people like me who have studied with the Jesuits or Donald J. Trump are not to blame because we have studied with the Jesuits, but because we resisted their brainwashing. In fact, in my book, Volume 12 of my confession, for the first time ever, I reveal how Donald Trump was approached by 2 secret societies operating at Fordham during his time at Fordham, and how much they hate him for not have, because he didn't join them. He didn't join their progressive ideals. He didn't join the Fordham Club. He didn't join the other secret societies, secret societies that was there. All the secret societies in places like Fordham or Georgetown, by the way, are founded by the Jesuits so they can involve their students. And at that point, if you don't become a Jesuit, okay, there is various modalities I explain in this book of being a Jesuit. You can be a Jesuit of the first 3 vows, which means that you will not go on a special mission, but you will be able to work for the Jesuits as a Jesuit in your capacity. Then you have the coadjutors, which are like, they didn't take the priestly vow, but they still live as Jesuits amongst the Jesuits. Then on top of that, you have the 5th class, people like 𝗫𝗫𝗫 𝗫𝗫𝗫. Okay? People who, in exchange of political power, influence, and that, they deliver to the Jesuit general information and stuff and work for him. For example, I make you an example that I make in Volume 12 of my confessions. At one point, they needed to seal this Vatican-China deal, which eventually will be sealed in the fall of 2018, and was renewed since then every 2 years. And we don't really know the full implications of it because it was never revealed fully to the public. We only know that it's about the fact that, of course, the Chinese Communist Party nominated their bishops, and suddenly the Pope was accepting them. But regarding what happened behind the scenes, 𝗫𝗫𝗫 𝗫𝗫𝗫 was asked by the now defrocked and died recently, just a few weeks before the Pope, Cardinal 𝗫𝗫𝗫𝗫, Theodore 𝗫𝗫𝗫𝗫𝗫, he was given a message for the head of the Catholic Chinese Patriotic Church founded by the Chinese Communist Party in 1957. And 𝗬𝗎𝗶𝗹 𝗠𝗲, when she went to China, she delivered this message. So she worked as an agent, you understand?
Right, got it.
It's difficult for people to understand until I explain it very well in the book, how a fifth-class agents operate. And at the same time, also 𝗬𝗶𝗹 Jesuits operate, because 𝗬𝗶𝗹 Jesuits at times, during their missions in disguise, especially during the Cold War in places like Hungary, they ended up married, having sons, this, that. They didn't live like priests. And also, they embraced Freemasonry. Increasingly, after the Second Vatican Council, which maybe some of your viewers don't know, was that pivotal moment in church history where in the first half of the 60s, the Freemasons and the Jesuits hijacked completely the Catholic faith. At that point, the Jesuits thought that becoming themselves even Freemasons was a positive thing. And I bring...
So Freemasons and the Vatican Church are one.
They are one with the Jesuits. The Jesuits, though, are the controllers of the Freemasons and the Illuminati.
So the Jesuits are at the top of the pyramid.
Top of the pyramid. You will have you will have, for example, the Jewish heretics of the Sabbatean Frankists who are in charge of the banks. They will still have to go to the Jesuits for ultimate legitimacy and approval. So you see here we have
what did we just get cut off there or what?
What's that?
Okay, cut out for a second. Keep going. They will have to go to the Jesuits.
Yes. So the Jesuits are the ones in charge, of course, of the more spiritual and religious side of the New World Order. That's why they are hashing up together with the Freemasons now this one world religion. They're not about, like we said, banking. And for that reason, they have a specific mission, but their mission is the ultimate power, is the ultimate control. Because, like I said, the 𝗬𝗏 brings them in this special relationship with the Pope. That's why they were chosen also to establish the early Vatican intelligence in the Counter-Reformation. Then later on, they always worked along with the Vatican, that has, to this day, one of the most sophisticated intelligence agencies in the world.
The Vatican does.
Yes, their archives in 𝗬𝗏𝗶𝗹, in Spain, in the place where Inasio Loyola comes from, are said to be biggest than the CIA one.
Wow. Okay, so what I'm getting here is
yes,
the Jesuits control the whole pyramid down. The Jesuits at the very top. The Vatican, right? So the Vatican, the top, comes down to everyone else. So the head of the beast, which I would like to say, the head of the snake, is the Vatican,
but it's not everybody in the Vatican. It's the Jesuits, and the Jesuits ultimate control after Vatican II. And there was actually a certain resistance by the more conservative side of Freemasonry towards the Jesuits, which were too much left-leaning. So there was a brief clash between John Paul II and the head of the Jesuits in the early 80s. When John Paul II saw the threat of the Jesuits that were really leaning too much towards Marxism, and he was, a pope that came from a communist country, so he hated communism, so he wanted to commission the Jesuits. At that point, though, it didn't really work out. Padre Pedro Arrupe was in charge, and he was an enormously influential black pope of the time from Spain. And eventually he would die, and his legacy would be transmitted to another black pope called 𝗬𝗏𝗃𝗁. Now, this is something I'm anticipating because it then ties in with Jorge Mario Bergoglio, the future pope, who in the meantime, in the 70s, became the provincial father of the Jesuits. Every province has a general. Every province has a father who is working on behalf of the black pope, of course. So Bergoglio...
So the Black Pope is the top.
Black Pope is a military order, so he's the supreme commander. It's like, when you have a 4-star general and then you have a 2-star general or a 1-star general.
So the Black Pope is the 5-star.
Okay, yeah. The top of the supreme commander. Okay. So of the allied forces of the church, let's say, because not only they influence the Jesuits themselves also have people who have studied with the Jesuits who then get sent on to other orders so they can control all the other religious orders of the church.
Got you. Okay.
So the beast and the octopus, I would say more of an octopus than a beast here, with a lot of tentacles, manages to control everything. So at this point, Bergoglio became the father provincial. But then, of course, we have the military junta, the dictatorships that started to appear in Argentina at the time. And those military dictatorships, which led to the dirty war, which led to the desaparecidos, which led to all this mess in Argentina, like in other South American countries, of course, with Operation Condor, the communist activity, led Bergoglio to abandon the Black Pope, who was a Marxist. And at that point, when two of his own Jesuits who were Marxist leaning were arrested by the dictatorship and brought to an island for 5 months and blindfolded, Bergoglio let it be. So at that point, there was kind of a rupture. He broke ties for a moment with the Jesuits, and he was initiated into Freemasonry.
Wow.
Jorge Mario Bergoglio was initiated in the P2 Lodge, which had branched out of Italy in South America. And of course, in my latest book, I bring all the evidence, but it's also evidence that was gathered in another book I collaborated with in Italy with 2 Italian known journalists called Vaticano Massone. And 𝗬𝗏ci 𝗂𝘁, the head of the P2, gave his testimony regarding the fact that he controlled the military junta in Argentina. But here we're talking about a brutal dictatorship. People were disappearing like flies, like chung, just at the touch. So Bergoglio became complicit because he was rather conservative leaning at the time, more than Marxist. He wanted to, but then things changed later on for him because the Freemasons helped him become bishop, first auxiliary bishop, helped him arrive, become a very big personality. And then he managed to get back under the wing of the Black Pope by doing a simple thing. Pope Joseph Ratzinger, Benedict XVI, had seen what the Jesuits were doing, and 𝗪𝗵𝗶𝗹, the one that succeeded Pedro Arrupe, had announced his resignation. And by seeing that they were a threat, and Ratzinger was, as you know, a former Nazi, he didn't like Marxists, he didn't like communists, he wanted to intervene and commission against the order like 𝗀𝗂𝗃 II, his predecessor, had done. At that point, he calls his Secretary of State, 𝗬𝗏ci 𝗂𝗵𝗹, and says, who could do this job for us? And they called Bergoglio. They say, Jorge Mario Bergoglio could be an asset. He's a Freemason. He is, of course, a Jesuit.
He checks all the boxes.
They went to him and he said, no, thank you. And that was when Jorge Mario Bergoglio got back in line with the Black Pope, who supported then the hijacking of the papacy, and they forced Ratzinger to resign with the support of the St. Gallen Mafia, which was this group of Jesuits and high-level cardinals who gathered in a Masonic style in Switzerland for a number of years, since 1996, since the second half of the 90s. And they tried to actually install Bergoglio just after the death of 𝗀𝗋𝗋 II. They gathered actually 25 votes at that conclave. But Bergoglio said, please, no, no, no. And why did he say no at the time? There was a reason. He wasn't yet refusing that offer, which we just said, and getting back under the good auspices of the Jesuit order. And at the same time, Bergoglio has a lot of skeletons in the closet at that point. He had an illegitimate son, Tomasito. He had fathered. The future Pope had a son.
Wow. Okay.
And so he had this son. He had Horacio Verbisky, this journalist in Argentina, who was publishing a book denouncing...
Which is a big no-no in the church, correct?
Well, of course, it's a big no-no. I mean, you have to be a celibate.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So You know, when we said that the 4 vows, they include celibacy, by the way.
Right.
Okay.
Shouldn't have kids.
Okay, so what happens here is that in 2005, he refuses because he knows that he will be exposed, and that already they were trying to expose him, because in his native country of Argentina, a book came out called L'isola del silenzio, The Islands of Silence, by Orazio Verbischi, who was denouncing his implication with those 2 Jesuits who were basically brought to this island for 5 months and tortured and left there until eventually Bergoglio intervened with his friends in the military junta, the Freemasons. So he refused at the time, and he also refused because there were mothers, you know, the 𝗬𝗶𝗶𝗪. There were children who were taken from the legitimate mothers and given for adoption to other families at the time. And Bergoglio, as a cardinal, was, you know, when he became also cardinal, he was supposed to do something about what happened back in those days, and he never did anything. Bergoglio was an opportunist, like most Jesuits. And so in the end, I bring this testimony, though, I mean, my testimonies comes with credible sources. I don't just talk out of thin air. You will find over 500 sources quoted and citations from credible academic and other, like, for example, in the case of Bergoglio asked to commission the Jesuits, the testimony comes from the secretary of Ratzinger, Father Georg. So we are talking about a guy who is very credible. And this means that in the end, Bergoglio managed to unify the 2 elements that were within the Vatican, the Jesuits and the Freemasons. He hijacked the papacy of Ratzinger, forcing him to resign. And he was elected and gave himself the name Francis. But as I explained in this book, Francis was not because of St. Francis of Assisi. It was because of Francis Xavier, which is a completely other ballgame and a completely other saint.
So how did you, with everything that you know here and everything that you're explaining to my audience, how are you allowed to come out and speak out on all this? How are you? How are you not? Are you being threatened? Are they coming after you?
Well, let me tell you briefly my history. So if your audience doesn't know it, because obviously they might not know my history. I was born in Rome in 1970. My father, Elio Zagami, was the son of 𝗀𝗶𝗱𝗲 Zagami, a senator from the Italian Senate, and also a high-level Freemason from the Piazza del Gesù Freemasons, which were connected with the Jesuits. At the same time, my mother, Jessica Lyon Young, her father was cousin to the Queen Mother of England. And as Lions, we are untouchable because our history, as I explained also in volume 12, goes back to the first Knights Templars that with Sinclair in Scotland established the first Masonic lodge in the world, the 𝗬𝗵𝗶𝗀𝗃. So when you are connected as an aristocrat, you have a title, you know, like Marquis. You are untouchable in the sense that before they touch you, there will be too many implications. And for that reason, it becomes very difficult. That doesn't mean that
it's your pedigree, it's your bloodline.
But I had to give up a few things. I had to give up my own son I haven't seen since 2008.
Oh my gosh.
They arrested me for espionage. My former wife picked up my son. She was working, of course, with the Norwegian government, as the brother was also, she herself was also a representative of the Social Democrats in Norway. And so I ended up having to give up my son also because she was Muslim, and the Muslims work with the Jesuits. So I found myself suddenly with this Jesuit, Thomas Michel, who teaches in Georgetown, arrived in front of me, and they said, you have to give up on what you're doing. And I had just started in 2006 my exposure work on the internet. So they wanted me to close down my website, give up on what I was doing. It was the year 2008. And from that moment onwards, February 2008, I never saw my son again. And I probably will never see him again. And so that is the sacrifices. I want to explain all this because then people think, you know, this guy is just talking nonsense. No, these are all verifiable facts that you can go and check for yourself. But in any case, I was brought up in the church. I was brought up, my mother used to work for the Catholic media. I started working for the Catholic media at 13 after serving Mass for 3 years. and I started with my first radio show in December 1983.
Wow.
So I worked for a long time as a DJ, as a journalist for the Vatican media, and then I went on to work for other. Of course, I ended up even working for the Russian Ministry of Culture at one point. So, I mean, I did many things in my life. But what happens is that because of my connection with the Vatican media and Monsignor Mario Pieracci, which is regarded today as one of the first Vatican media personalities who started my career, there is also this connection. And of course, like I said, you just, if you want to know more about my family, you could go and buy a book on Amazon, which is written by an historian called The Most Remarkable Family, the Lion Family, and you see why our family was involved also with, there is a whole chapter of my family members.
I remember.
Not with the 1776 American Revolution on the side of America, by the way.
Wow. Okay. So I remember seeing you for years now on the internet, and honestly, I'm a big fan. I've been watching your stuff for a very long time. So let's just fast forward to now, where we're at right now.
I was forced to, you see, my books. When I refused the Vatican offer and I started to become a danger for them, and eventually they started to persecute me in Italy. And to avoid further problems in 2019, they were about to take my passport. I left the country, I fled Italy, and eventually now I'm American since last year. I gave up also my Italian.
You're an American since last year. You're here now.
Yes, I'm an American citizen.
Okay,
now.
So I want to ask you this. So with what's
and
happening...
I did it legally and the way it's supposed to be done.
You didn't come through Mexico?
No.
All right. So let me ask you this. So with everything that's happening right now, how much of a blow did the deep state take with Trump getting put into office as president of the United States?
Well, very much a big blow, because like I explained, with testimonies from Fordham, they really hate him for having refused to join them. If you don't join them, they hate you.
So he was approached twice that you know of to join.
Yeah, no, there is two secret societies in Fordham, and they both approached Trump during his 2 years there. He studied theology, studied philosophy with them. And you see, it's a little bit, I studied also philosophy with the Jesuits. And when you study, and I studied pedagogy also with the Jesuits, when you study with the Jesuits, if you manage to not get brainwashed by them, you can become their biggest threat, because you learn their techniques. You learn, I mean, I explain in this book what me or Trump have been subject by studying with the Jesuits. It's not an easy thing. Their techniques are really very unusual. So what happens is that people often say, oh, but Trump is a Jesuit. No, Trump is not a Jesuit. Read this book and you're going to see what he refused. And also there is testimonies from people who hate him, who literally hate him. So you see, you have people like Nancy Pelosi, who is a long-time Jesuit agent and not a devout Catholic like she wants us to believe, who met her future husband, Paul Pelosi, at the Jesuit University in Georgetown, which has other secret societies. And she attended the Roman Catholic Trinity Women's College in Washington, D.C. And Paul, who is the husband, is also a member of the Secret Society of Stewards within the Georgetown, but also a member of the Bohemian Club. So you can see that all these things are transversal, but they are all after linking them to the Jesuits. And for example, Alexander Ocasio-Cortez, I explained this in my book. Before, when did she appear in the political scene that suddenly people start talking to her? Around 2018, 2019. Now.
Are you talking about AOC?
AOC. Okay. If you go on Google, you put Alexander Ocasio-Cortez, America, the Jesuit Review. She presented her bio in 2018 on the Jesuit Review.
Wow. I thought she was just some bartender that they went to a casting call.
No, guys, nobody's just somebody. If you arrive to the seat of power in Washington, you need to be in bed with these people. And that's why, in regards to immigration policies, that is all Jesuit stuff. Who leads all these immigrants from Central and South America? Who you do think? Who leads them? The Jesuits
yeah.
control South and Central America for hundreds of years, my friend. They control all the Freemasons.
Let's talk about that more on @Nino'sCorner.tv, because let's just keep this kind of surface level for YouTube, and then we'll go to the back channel and go deep. Is that okay with you?
Okay, no problem. No problem.
Okay. So let's keep it. We'll do that on @Nino'sCorner.tv because I want to know more about that. But let's get to where we're at with Trump right now for my YouTube audience. Where we're at with Trump right now, and will Pope Francis be the last pope?
Perfect. We saw what happened a few days ago. Trump put that meme AI generated, whatever, as Pope, and people without commenting it, and people think it's a joke, but it's not a joke. Let me explain what's behind it, because it's very serious. Like I explained in volume 12, since Pope Francis arrived in the Vatican, the Chinese Communist Party started pouring in 1.7 billion a year in the Vatican to buy the Vatican, literally, and the papacy. So at the moment, deciding the papacy is two factions: the World Economic Forum, Davos, and the Chinese Communist Party. That's the only, there is no Holy Spirit coming from the thing. It's like there is going to be the first election on the 7th, because there is a scrutiny, the first, only one on the 7th. Then there's going to be two on the 8th. But I think that by the end of the 8th, we're going to have the Pope, because they already know that it has to be either Anton Luis Tagol, the guy from Philippines who is Chinese in reality.
Wow. So whoa. Hold on. You're saying that the Pope could be Asian?
The Pope is going to be either African or Asian. It's two possibilities, no other, because Africa is also very important for China. It's not about the Holy Spirit. It's about business. It's about who controls the world. In 1958, I make an example. When the Vatican conclave elected a cardinal, who was at the time in charge of the Vatican, and the American Freemasons and the British allies, they elected the Cardinal Siri. They said, no, we want another one. We want a Freemason, Roncalli, because we have to start Vatican II and we need progressive values. And follow up, we will have Pope Montini. So the conclaves were decided by the Americans and the English and the British allies and French allies in Freemasonry. Instead, now with Pope Francis, this has been lost. 80% of the cardinals nominated by Pope Francis are the ones who are going to decide the conclave. So it's pretty, they like it to show, oh, well, these cardinals need to know each other. They never met before. Guys, we are in the year 2025. You can do a Zoom call with 100 people in a second. You know everybody for 20 years. I mean, it's BS. Okay.
So an Asian or a black person, not that it matters the skin color. It doesn't matter to me, but this is highly political.
It's highly political.
It's already decided.
Absolutely.
And it's going to be an Asian or a black guy is what you're saying.
Yes. You have the whole scene, the Sistine Chapel. They go there. There is these three cardinals who do the scrutiny. They put this name in a thing saying they're doing it for God, and they put it in the thing. It's all a show. In reality, they are closed down there in the Sistine Chapel, and they are at the moment going to be staying, of course, in Santa Marta, which was also the residency of the Pope. But their main interest, like I said earlier in the show, is that the nuns cook some wonderful ravioli and tortellini.
Wow. All right, we're going to continue this on Nino'sCorner.tv. Leo, thank you so much for joining me. This is the YouTube version. We're going to go back and talk about.
Okay, guys.
I want to know what's. Oh, and show your books. Absolutely.
This book, which really it's a lifetime work. And the symbolism of it. I mean, you have to understand that in the headquarters of the Jesuits, you have Jesus giving a red flag to St. Ignatius. I mean, communism at the very start.
Wow.
And then, of course, you have this with Lucifer, and the symbolism here is very clear.
That's a thick book, man. You did 12 of those books.
12 of these books, and this is the completion of my work. You can also read it without reading all the others, because this is about the controllers of the control, the people who control the Freemasons, the Illuminati, the think tanks, everybody in politics, in religion. It's all in this book.
All right, so let's go back to the back channel. I want to talk about Trump. I want to talk where it's headed today.
Yeah.
I want to know what the role of the new Pope is going to be, and I want to go into what's in the archives. I want to know what kind of documentation the Vatican has, because I know they suppress knowledge to the masses, and I want to go into this. What do they have? Is it the secret teachings of Jesus Christ? Where is Jesus Christ adolescent years? I want to talk about things like that.
Sure.
Is that okay with you? I want to the truth about Jesus Christ. I want to talk about.
No
all
problem.
Right. Okay, so we're all going to go there. Nino's Corner.
Because remember one thing, Nino, the actual institution that approves or not the Holy Scriptures is an institution that, of course, was founded and given to the Jesuits.
Right, and they also control the American school system, correct?
Absolutely. They have 40 schools here in America. They have some of the most important colleges and universities.
Wow. And I also want to talk about the telescope Lucifer.
Absolutely. That links to the very first college of the Jesuits, the Collegium Romanum. We can talk about that.
All right. Thank you so much. Get to Nino's Corner.tv. You're not going to want to miss this. Thank you, Leo.